What is going on, everyone? Today is April 13th, 2024. You're tuned in to the first ever Saturday edition of the Invest in Hockey podcast. I have my Masters sweater on right now. We've been absolutely dialed this weekend. Haven't been watching too much hockey. We've been all over the Masters. Eric, his first time watching one of, the biggest golf tournaments in all of the PGA Tour, but definitely looking forward to talking hockey. And I know Eric's been waiting for a while now. We've been so busy with exams that unfortunately we missed the Tuesday that we always do. But hey, we're here Saturday. We're better. We're going to try something a little bit different. And yeah, we got a lot of good topics coming up today.
Super stoked. Yeah, like you couldn't have said any better. We've been swamped with exams. Honestly, being able to watch a couple holes of the Masters has been good. But even for hockey, like I didn't watch much hockey at all this week. I didn't even watch any Leafs games where I think Matthews scored all his goals. I didn't watch any Bruins. A little weird of a week, but we found time for the podcast this Saturday, so I'm happy we can do that. Um, Thanks for finding the time, Anthony. And yeah, I think we'll get into this big slate of hockey on Saturday, and then we'll move into some of the drama around the NHL.
Oh, dude, lots of drama. And the playoffs are right around the corner, man. I can't wait. April 20th is the first game. And you would think that by now we'd pretty much be looking at like playoff brackets and you'd know exactly who is playing who and what the lineups are going to be. But we're seeing recently all these changes with the wild card race. The Flyers are out of the playoffs out of nowhere. Mark Stone yesterday, the news about Arizona. Like there's a ton of news to talk about. So without further ado, I mean, I want to talk about the wild card race, how good it's been. All these teams have been in and out. We saw, I believe the Islanders just hopped into a playoff spot. Was it Friday or Thursday? I think just recently. Islanders are in, Flyers are out, Leafs are struggling. They just lost a stinker to the New Jersey Devils. Everything's a little all over the place, and there's only 7 days until the playoffs.
Yeah, I don't even know what to make of like the whole wild card situation because like today's games matter a lot. The games on Tuesday matter a lot. There's a couple back to backs. I'm sure you noticed that. So it's almost like a team might not have that energy on back to back to actually get 4 points. Doesn't matter who they're playing, right? So like I every team's still in it. Again, if you're not eliminated, you're not eliminated. Like we saw Philly kind of stay in the race with a win over the Rangers, and that was their first win in 12 games. That's the only reason they're still in the race. I mean, the Islanders have had a really flunky season where we're actually seeing them score goals this year, which hasn't been a trend for them in the past, and that's why they're in a wild card spot right now. And then you see like the positivity around the Penguins, which is finally there, right? Like Carlson scores that OT winner, you can see the happiness obviously for them to win that game. And then I don't know. I think with Detroit in the East, that's a little underwhelming the way that they're being talked about. No one's really mentioning them, but the West is another story where there's not as big of a wild card race. But obviously, we're in the East here. We followed the East a little more just because of the Leafs and stuff. So I think it's been nothing short of awesome, and I think the game's already started today, right?
Yeah, game started I think at 12:30. It was Islanders and someone, if I remember correctly, seeing that last night. But to say like 2 months ago that the Penguins are going to sneak into a wild card spot, which they're sitting in the wild card spot, second wild card spot right now, and I believe they're projected to play the Rangers. So it would be Penguins Rangers if the season were to end today. And I mean, the Rangers are a good team, but I could definitely see, a world where Sidney Crosby raises his team above the Rangers and heads into that second round. So just to look at these matchups, dude, it's like 2 months ago we were writing off Crosby at the trade deadline. We were kind of thinking, could he be traded? Could this be the year where, the Penguins move on from Crosby? Is it an option? Like to even talk about that, you look at someone like Ovechkin, who although they were in the hunt, they are now out of a wild card spot. I don't think any Washington fan would even want to hear anything about Ovi getting traded or even the idea of it. So I'm sure Penguins fans weren't happy at all to hear Crosby's name in the mix on trade deadline day.
Yeah, I think that whole narrative was extremely dramatic, especially when we mentioned Jake Gensel. And I'm not gonna say too much until the playoff teams are decided, but I will say that whenever a team is in a certain spot, people love to like just go with the flow and hate on a team if they're not in the playoffs or hate on a team if they're far out. And then if a team's like sitting comfortably, they're just gonna they're gonna root for that team and say, "Oh, they're good. They're making the playoffs." It's almost like no one wants to be different, and no one wants to say, "Okay, this team still has a shot." And like that was exactly what happened around the deadline when we made that Jake Gensel post up on our YouTube and on our Instagram, and the amount of hate and controversy we received in the comments was it was pretty disgusting. So I'm not going to talk about that till these matchups are set. But a lot of things were said that are not true, and I think a lot of these viewers are wrong. So we're gonna have to address that. You know.
Geez, Eric's trying to address that at the end of the season. If the Penguins could win a playoff round, and something's going on over there. I don't know what you're cooking, but you're definitely keeping receipts on them. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, I'll hold you to it. I'll hold you to it. If you have something to say and the Penguins do well, like by all means, you gotta speak your mind. But for sure, looking at the Penguins right now, Cal Dubas is excited, back in the hunt. Could he maybe meet the Leafs at some point come playoffs? I don't know exactly. We'd have to see when the brackets are all set. But just imagine something like that. Penguins beat out the Leafs in the playoffs. What an absolute slap in the face.
That would be crazy, especially no one's really like said anything good about Dubas in the last couple of months. Like it was obviously good when he acquired Carlson, but yeah, no one's talked great on Dubas. No one's talked like amazing about the Leafs. So it's interesting. Well, I'd love to see him. I think that matchup would be great.
Yeah, the Leafs are in a spot right now where they're kind of, I don't know, I don't think they're in a good spot because watching every Leafs game, it feels like every game is just pushing towards getting Matthews to that 70 goal mark. And I know it's a great mark to hit, but they need to focus on the next chapter. And the next chapter is the playoffs. Obviously, it doesn't look like they're going to win the President's Trophy. There are a couple teams in that mix that I know you want to touch on who you think might receive the President's Trophy. And get that President's Trophy curse that we've heard of so many times. We saw last year. I mean, our Boston Bruins, they get the President's Trophy, and then look what happened. Out first round, and it's happened so many years. But for the Toronto Maple Leafs, you got to focus up, get ready for the playoffs here.
Yeah, I think that with like the whole President's Trophy thing, I'm really happy for the Bruins that they won't be winning it again this year. Just based on how the standings look, I think a team like the Rangers could win it this year. Um, I don't think we're going to see a team from the West win. I'm just feeling the Rangers, but obviously there's no locked. It's not locked in yet. But I think the thing people don't want to talk about is that 50% of teams lose in the first round, and so again, you can win the President's Trophy, but there's so many good teams this year, like teams that we didn't talk about last year because they were irrelevant, right? The Jets, the Canucks, even the Islanders were terrible last year. Again, any team in the first round can do some damage, right?
No, 100%. I mean, although for like a team like Vancouver, Winnipeg, like you mentioned, for a team like that to touch a President's Trophy to win it, I feel like that would be a positive. Just because when you look at where they were at the start of the season, I mean, talk about Winnipeg. They were thinking about blowing that team up. I don't know if you remember, they didn't have Scheifele or Hellebuck signed, and both of them signed identical deals. That pretty much said, we're pushing our chips all in. This is the group of guys, and I feel like that just gave a massive confidence boost to the group. Switching over to Vancouver, I don't think they were supposed to be in the spot either. Like they didn't anticipate being one of the better teams in the West, and look at them now. They are. Could they get the President's Trophy? I don't know. But for a team, if you're going to talk about Colorado, if you're going to talk about the Leafs, I don't think the President's Trophy is your goal right now at all.
Yeah, I think like you were saying earlier, I didn't even acknowledge that point about the Leafs focusing on the last few games, but um, yeah, you could go into the playoffs cold, and it can bring up so many questions, right? Like the Leafs are gonna have a back to back on I think it's Tuesday, Wednesday, right, or a Monday, Tuesday, and that's gonna say a lot about who you're starting in the playoffs. And that's just to address one team. We have Vancouver in another situation where Demko's going to come into the playoffs cold because he was hurt, and that's not his fault. But like it could definitely start with a dud game one, right? So
Oh, no, I definitely know what you mean. I feel like that's why for the Vegas Golden Knights, they could be in a tough spot come game one because, like you said, these players are going to come in cold. Obviously, Mark Stone's practicing with the team. He hasn't had any gameplay since what, mid-February, I think it was, or
yeah.
like February 12th, February 13th, something like that. Even someone like Thomas Hurdle, he's been out for a while, hasn't played on with this new team. What are we just going to expect that he's going to be on power play one come game one of the playoffs and it's just miraculously going to operate at like above 25%? Like, well, I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know personally. There are a bunch of teams that I think might go into the playoffs and start off really cold, couple teams with a vengeance. If we're gonna compare 2, I know we already talked about them. I think Vancouver, like you said, might go in cold. Demko a little bit colder. Vancouver hasn't really been with these high expectations in a couple years. Winnipeg, my personal, a team that I have done a little bit of work for them, so I like them a little bit more than some other teams, but so maybe there's a little bit of bias is where I'm coming from. I just think Winnipeg's been in a spot a couple times where they've lost some tough playoff games. Last year, a tough loss to, I believe it was Colorado or Vegas in the first round. I think they lost to
Year
Vegas
before,
in
yeah.
6, something like that. And man, that barn gets buzzing. I don't know if you've ever seen the whiteout there at the Winnipeg Jets arena, but dude, it is insane.
Mhm,
Absolutely insane. So I'm rooting for the Jets. A lot of good options, and yeah,
mhm.
it should be a pretty good playoff.
But yeah, they need that whiteout back. I think the fans are excited for that, right? So, I guess that gets me into a couple questions for you around the Masters. You mentioned how I don't really watch it, but I was able to watch some with you this week. And so you're gonna get a little couple player comparisons to the NHL. Maybe talk about who's doing well at the Masters quick, and then we'll head into some buzz around Arizona.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I've been waiting for this segment for a little bit. I want to do it on Tuesday as like a pre-tournament thing to kind of get the hockey fans into the feel of the Masters. So what I did here was I think it's 10 players, what I wanted to aim for. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna name their NHL comparison and then why, just like a quick little why I think, if you're an NHL fan and you watch a lot of NHL, but you don't watch a lot of golf, all right, maybe this is a guy, they're in the same sort of boat. So without further ado, I'm going to start off at the top. He's leading the Masters right now with, I believe, a 7 or 8 shot lead. I haven't watched it in about an hour. Scottie Scheffler, we're going to compare him to Nathan McKinnon. Dude is an absolute weapon on the golf course. He can score. He's offensive. Like, if you're going to compare it to hockey, you could still say scoring in golf because birdies, eagles, all that stuff. He is a great player. He could putt. He's great off the tee. His iron game, his ball striking ability is incredible. And all around, I'd say, Nathan McKinnon would be a great comparison to Scottie Scheffler right now. And if you're looking at it, on top of their game at each respective at the top of their game at each respective sport. Pretty good comparison. Second up, we're gonna go with Connor McDavid. Obviously, just as talented as Nathan McKinnon, but we're gonna take a step down right now to Rory McIlroy. A lot of you have probably heard about him. I'm gonna compare him to McDavid because Rory has the trophies. He has, if you want to compare it like to McDavid, he has the Hart trophies. He has the Art Ross. He has the Rocket Richard even that he got last year. But what Rory is missing is that green jacket at the Masters to complete his Grand Slam. So for me, I think Connor McDavid is a great comparison to Rory, missing that one thing, that one little thing that can make
Yeah,
him a great player to sport. So
good
that's a great
call.
play for me. Next up is Jack Eichel. We're going a step lower now. Jack Eichel, so a player that just won a big, big tournament last year. Or let me backtrack. Jack Eichel, who just won the Stanley Cup last year, wasn't really expected to be the leader of such a successful group. Kind of came out of nowhere considering there's a lot of good options to win the Stanley Cup last year. Vegas wins. Eichel's on top of the world out of nowhere, and people were finally starting to respect him just for that. So comparing it to golf, I'm going to go with John Rahm. So John Rahm won the Masters last year. Kind of came out of left field. I know there's a lot of good options. Even Tiger was in the mix last year, so people were kind of loving him to win the tournament. But John Rahm obviously wins that tournament, signs with Live Golf, which is another conversation. But
Yeah.
back on top of the world, the man at his sport, and he is struggling. I think he's +4 this weekend, so a little bit tough. I'll try and speed it up here. But Jamie Benn, a player who has been to the Stanley Cup final. I don't remember who they lost to. Was it Pitt? No. Who did they lose to?
Tampa, I think.
I'm pretty sure. So I'm gonna compare Jamie Benn to Xander Schauffele. So if you know Xander Schauffele, great player, been around for a while. I think he's 30 years old. I'm pretty sure. Amazing player, but his issue is he always comes up just short. So if we're gonna compare it to Jamie Benn, hey, great player, doesn't get a lot of that media attention, just like Xander Schauffele. But Xander is notorious for coming like second, coming third, coming fourth in tournaments, but always performing well. I believe he's +1 this weekend, coming up a little bit short. I don't see him competing that hard come Sunday.
Good call on that one,
Next
yeah.
up, one of my favorite comparisons. So a lot of people might not know this guy, but he did win the Masters and 17, I believe, cuts made in a row for major tournaments in golf. Hideki Matsuyama, the former Master winner, all around player, iron game, short game, putting, off the tee. He's amazing. Very consistent. I'm going to compare him to Ryan O'Reilly because when we look at hockey, Ryan O'Reilly is he's always in the mix. He's a good defensive player, good offensive player, good teammate. I'm going to compare Ryan O'Reilly to Hideki Matsuyama.
Beauty.
Next up, and we're wheeling with these. I'm hoping you're learning because these are some of the top players at the sport. So I feel like these could be some of the best comparisons on
Yeah.
YouTube. So I put a lot of time into this.
I think the best,
Next up,
not some of the best. Yes, the best.
hey, hey. I don't know if anyone else is doing this. So next up we got JT Miller, a player who, he's been good for a while, got a little attitude to him, but a good attitude makes him a better player and not scared to talk in the media, not scared to show his emotion. I'm gonna compare him to Brooks Koepka. So Brooks is an amazing golfer, great, great, great ball striker. His iron game is unreal. And as some of you may know, Brooks is a little bit of a, if we want to call it a hothead. He did have that little beef with Bryson DeChambeau about 2 years ago. He has that swag to him, that aggressiveness, and I feel like him and JT Miller would match up pretty well for some comparisons. Next up, we got Jordan Spieth, former Master winner. Very, very tough weekend right now for him at the Masters. I think he's like +9 or probably even +10. He's just been brutal, but he is looking for that second green jacket. Probably won't get it this year. I believe he actually missed the cut, so yeah, he won't get it this year.
Yeah.
Next year he'll be looking for the second green jacket. I'm going to compare him to Matthew Barzal. Spieth is a little bit older, but we're looking at someone that started off hot when they were younger and then has really just came down a little bit. The only thing I'll say about Barzal is that he did pick up his game this year, where Spieth hasn't. But if we want to talk about someone that maybe was at the top of their game in their rookie season and then just kind of came down, I'm going to compare him to Jordan Spieth.
Good call.
3 more players left. I know you want to get wheeling here.
No worries.
Next up, we got the rookie, the young guy. If you want to compare someone to Connor Bedard, if you're looking for the Connor Bedard of golf, we're looking at, I might butcher his name, Ludwig Aberg. So he's a new, I believe, German player, playing great at the Masters too. This is Masters debut, and usually people that play in their Masters debut don't even play well. So for Ludwig, he's at the top of his game already as a rookie. He's competing with some of these top players that have been around playing major tournaments for 10 plus years. So he's going to be around for a while. Get used to hearing his name. The last player I want to compare, someone that has been playing well this weekend, and although these comparisons were made on Tuesday, I might want to change this one up, but for now I'm just going to keep Bryson DeChambeau, who is in the top 3, as Leon Draisaitl. So someone who can, score 60 goals out of nowhere in a flash. Next year, Leon could come score 60, and that might be from the help of McDavid. I know you're not the biggest Leon guy, but I feel like Leon could be in the conversation for top 3 at a sport. I don't personally see him at that, but I could see why people would make that comparison. And for Bryson, the way he's playing right now, that's the exact same scenario. I mean, looking back 2-3 weeks ago, we probably had Bryson out of the top 10 of golfers in the world. I think he actually was out of the top 10. And you could almost say the same about Leon, the way that he's been playing. Maybe he's not in the top 10, considering he was top 3 just a couple years ago. So those are all my comparisons. If you're watching the Masters this weekend, enjoy. Hopefully, if you're just tuning into the sport and you want to start watching more and compare it to hockey, this kind of gave you a good comparison to kind of gauge your entrance to the sport. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, a little bit of an understanding. Yeah, I would just say that I probably could have made this segment 10 times longer just by asking you questions, because I have so many. I got so many questions. I'll save those for later, after we get our exams done. But honestly, I want to, for someone who doesn't watch golf, I think the Eichel comparison was perfect, considering that this John guy won the Masters last year. That one really stood out to me. And then being able to put Bedard in there is pretty sneaky by you. So I'll give you a big shout out, Sans. So
Oh, for sure. I think that Eichel one too was probably like my sharpest comparison because Eichel's always been good, Rom's always been good, but no one's really put them as the top five in the sport really. And then out of nowhere last year, Rom takes the takes the jacket at the Masters, takes the green jacket. Eichel takes the Stanley Cup, and out of nowhere, who is this guy? Where'd he come from? But it's like he's
yeah,
always been good, He's just never got that love and support. So I know you want to talk about a little bit of a controversial situation happening right now in the NHL. Arizona moving to Salt Lake City will be called Utah, however. It seems like last night the big announcement was made per Elliot Friedman, saying Frank Cervalli, and some of the major sport NHL analysis
yeah,
yeah, journalists.
yeah. I mean, you couldn't have said it better. Salt Lake City, it looks like we're going to get a relocation. So not a new team, but a relocation. Should still see 32 teams in the league, but it seems like the Coyotes players have been informed that it looks promising, right? So no confirmation, but looks promising that they're going to move to Salt Lake City. The big question for our viewers, as hockey fans, you have to question what's the name going to be called, where are they going to play, this, that, and a big question would be, are they going to be called Utah blank, or are they going to be called Salt Lake City blank, right? So that's a question where I think Salt Lake City, that's already 3 words, so means you got to have a bit of a shorter team name there, maybe. But we have the Utah Jazz in basketball. We have a lot of questions surrounding the name, and I did do a little bit of research, kind of gathered five-ish names that could possibly be the team name. So, and I'm sure you might have one in mind, Sam. So I'll definitely, if you want to chime in with what you're thinking too, feel free to stop
Yeah.
me where in my tracks, right? So,
Yep.
um, I guess first and foremost, I want to have one team name with an S just to be a classic, as a classic name, and that would be the Salt Lake Seals. And Seals
Ooh.
in water. I mean, it just makes sense. We've had the NHL history with the California Golden Seals. I think they could do something with the Seals in the NHL where you still keep that history of the Seals jersey. We're not going to use that, but we use a similar concept. So I could see something like that. Seals are an aggressive animal, right, in the water. So I think something like that could work. Um, Again, I don't think that it would be Salt Lake City blank. I think it would have to be Salt Lake and then the name, right? So, um, secondly, I want to bring up another sport because I know we talked about golf today, but I want to bring up soccer, and that is a team called Real Salt Lake. So they're in the MLS. They play against Toronto FC, LA Galaxy, all the teams, and I thought it was pretty interesting how they're not called Salt Lake Storm or Salt Lake something like that, but I think they could definitely do a bit of a collaboration with another sport there.
Oh,
I thought of
that'd be sick.
yeah, you know what I'm trying to say? Like, just kind of how like the Kraken did a bit of a tribute to the minor hockey, things like that, right? And then I thought of a few other names, just Utah names here. I've got Utah Arctic, I've got Utah Stealth, and then I'll get into my fifth name here, which I don't really have a name here, but I saw a bit of history, and there's actually an animal called shorebirds. I don't know if you've heard of shorebirds before, Sans,
No, I never heard of that.
but they actually obviously have to do with birds in Salt Lake, and how when I looked into some of the team names in Utah, they actually have the Utah Grizzlies of the ECHL, and then they have Utah Minor Hockey, and I believe they're called the Chiefs or something. And so I'm like, you got to have an animal as a candidate, right? And so whether that's the Salt Lake Shorebirds or the Utah Shorebirds, I think something like that would be pretty cool. You can give me your thoughts quick. I know we'll keep talking hockey here, but I thought it'd be pretty cool for our viewers too.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's just exciting. Like, obviously, there's a discussion to be had, and it's hard to speculate exactly what that's going to look like when it happens. But the move to Arizona to Utah is going to be tough. A lot of players that are going to, and Elliot talked about it, like a lot of players that are going to come out and say, "But look, I signed an 8-year extension with Arizona. I want to live in Arizona. I don't want to move to Utah. Like, I just
Yeah.
built like a $5 million house. Like, what am I going to do?" Like, so a lot of discussion to have for that. That's a little bit negative, but the positive side is it looks like there will be a new team in the NHL, a new aspect to the NHL, so that'll be pretty sweet. I don't know exactly, what the team name is going to be. Would have to do a little bit more checking up on that. Even like with like copyrights, it's so crazy all that stuff you have to go through.
Mhm.
I just feel like something cool would be like the Salt Lake, like you mentioned, like the Sea Dogs. I think it was right, like Salt Lake
Yeah.
City Sea Dogs or something. I mean, dude, that would be super sweet. Even like the Salt Lake City, like serpents. I don't know, like something with like the S. You know what I mean? Like something
Yeah.
that like rings really nice. But it feels like the Seattle Kraken, the Vegas Golden Knights, some of these new teams have really gotten the name that stuck really well.
Yeah, and the one thing I will say, because I'm sure some of the names I said sounded a little funny, but do any, um, I did not do any research on other articles or what other people thought. I know there's all these articles coming out, obviously in the last 24 hours, but I did not look at any of those. I kind of just did my research on where Salt Lake City was, what it was popular for, how the weather was, and obviously they are also into skiing there. So you could mention something about the winter. That's why I threw in Arctic, right? Like you just got to
Oh
be
yeah.
creative, but hopefully our viewers can appreciate that. And I think that brings us into our last topic, which we want to address. And it has to do with Montreal a little bit. It has to do with a recent draft. So if you want to introduce that.
Yeah, I know I think it was 2 years ago that in the second round, Lane Hudson was drafted to the Montreal Canadiens. And it was just a couple months ago where we were watching him in the World Junior Championship, and we were saying like, "Who is this guy? Like, he must have been a top 10 draft pick." No, man, Montreal drafted him in the second round, 62nd or 67th overall, or something, or 57th, I think it was. And like, they got an absolute stud out of this guy. Looks like he's signing his 3-year rookie deal with them. Pretty exciting to get a little bit of action with him. Definitely got to tune into a Montreal game when he's playing. And for those of you that haven't watched a lot of him in college, their team just got kicked out of the playoffs. A little bit of a tough loss, but if we're gonna compare him to someone in the NHL, we gotta compare him to Quinn Hughes. Like left shot, could move the puck, could skate, could shoot, could pass. Like all around, just a great offensive player. We're gonna see how well he can be defensively, but I think this is a great move for Montreal.
Yeah, I mean, you were bang on with 62 when you said 62. So he was drafted 62nd overall, and it actually shows that he's played a game. I don't remember it, but he played a game.
Really?
He didn't doesn't have any stats for that game. Many he probably only played a few shifts or anything. But I kind of recall. Guess he was called up or something. And anyways, he signed his entry level deal. That's why we wanted to mention him. So he signed his entry level deal, and I wanted to just do a brief segment. I know we have to wrap things up, but on I guess the potential that youth have and the idea of youth not needing to be rushed into the league. And so when we look at the 2022 draft, um, the only player that's played over 100 games is Juraj Slavkovsky. And in those 118 games, he's got 58 points, 23 goals, 35 assists. A lot of those points are of late when he scored his first hat trick, right? And so it's pretty crazy to me to think that he's the only guy who's even surpassed the 50 point mark. But yet again, that just shows that there's absolutely no need for these guys to be full NHL players yet if they have more development to do, right? And so you're just seeing all these players taking different paths, and to see a couple guys being given chances like Logan Cooley, Shane Wright, and slowly being brought up. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So um, we have a couple other guys. Shane Wright has only played 16 games this far. Juracek, a guy we talk about him a lot, Sans, in terms of his hockey cards and stuff. He's only played
Oh, for sure.
45 games, right? So it's pretty interesting. I don't know if you have another guy in that draft you like. I think there's a guy on Buffalo you're a fan of there at too.
I mean, I know I do like Zach Benson. He is playing that first peeper now, and he has like 8 points in 9 games. Me and Davis were just talking about it because that's when they put him on the power play, or it's like 8 points in 5 games, something like that. But he's been good this year, and it just kind of goes to show that you can find that youth offensive power when you call up a player early. So maybe that could be something that Montreal is looking for to end out what's been a tough season, sort of. Obviously, Suzuki's blossomed. Caulfield had a little bit of a tougher year, didn't reach his expectations. It seems like Montebo is pretty happy to be in Montreal. So the team's starting to kind of shape around, especially like you said, with Slavkovsky playing well. Like he is playing well. This is a successful season for him.
Yeah,
And I don't think he missed too many games. So if you're a Montreal fan, you definitely got to look at that crop and just sit back and
yeah,
enjoy the show.
yeah. Again, you talk about sitting back and enjoying the show. There's a lot of what we do when, once teams get eliminated, it's hard to keep talking about them. But I will say for a lot of these teams that are eliminated, they've still had success. Like look at Calgary; they've been playing well, although they're eliminated. Kuzmenko with a hat trick, I think last
Hat
night
trick
was it?
yesterday. Yeah,
Like
yeah, hat trick
you
yesterday.
have to see like the bright spots when a team's eliminated. Do you think the locker room is going to be all all um all hyped and all happy? Maybe not, but if you have bright spots, clearly that's going to translate into the off season when you work harder for that next year, right?
Oh, 100%, 100%.
And yeah, anyways, I wanted to bring up that draft just because obviously it's the future of hockey. It's where the investments are made for our podcast, right? So, had to
There
mention
we go.
that. I think we had a great pod today talking about the Masters. We've mentioned so many sports now. We talked Super Bowl, we've talked Masters. There's been another sport too. I don't even remember what it is, but
Maybe like
um,
baseball or something?
yeah, probably something like baseball. But yeah, I think it's a great way to end off. We're gonna have our next pod in probably 3 4 days because it will be on a Tuesday, and then we'll be transitioning back home. We got a big Montreal trip coming up soon, so lots coming up for the
Oh, yeah.
Invest in Hockey podcast. Again, we want to collaborate with everyone out there, so we're shooting some messages out. Shoot us a DM, um, interact with us, and yeah, thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, cheers everyone for joining. I wanna end off the pod. Eric, who's your pick to win the Masters?
Oh, I'm gonna go right off you, Sans. It's Scottie Scheffler.
Hey, there we go. I like that. Hey, my pick, Max Homa. I think Max Homa is going to be wearing that green jacket. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We'll talk to you next week, and yeah, enjoy the Masters.
Cheers.